keynote speech, which will be actually jointly done by Yannick Autret, Carme Rossell, and Thierry Goger. So let me first invite Yannick.
Thank you everything thank you to the whole team organizing the conference. It's really a great honor to be with you today. 6 years ago, I was also in charge of the IENE 2016 conference, and I know how stressful it can be, and especially it's also a challenge to organize it in a hybrid version. So I hope that most of you are also physically here, but I know that many people are attending online, and it will be also a challenge during the whole conference to be able to have interactions for physical participants and online participants. And thank you for the organization to allow us to have this hybrid opportunity to exchange. So, but today, with Thierry and Carme, we will speak about the BISON project. Let me introduce myself just shortly. I am Yannick Autret from the French Ministry of Ecological Transition. I work at the Research and Innovation Service, and I'm in charge of the National Research Program dedicated to infrastructure, ecosystem, and landscape. And since years, as we are working with the IENE, we were looking to know how this topic could be developed at European scale, and what were barriers to be overcome in the future to mainstream really infrastructure and biodiversity. And in 2018, we had also the opportunity to engage the discussion with the European Commission to propose them to introduce for the first time within the Horizon Europe H 2020 at this time the topic of transport and biodiversity as really something to be developed. And they said yes, okay, we will introduce this topic, and the BISON project is also the fruit of this discussion that we had. But it's also a time. It's also a time really important for not only for IENE members, but for European members and beyond, because we face really a tsunami of infrastructure. It was the word that Bill Lawrence used some years ago to describe what we are facing now. At a global scale, we have more than 94 trillions of dollars. Sorry, it's a huge amount of money that will be invested on infrastructure in upcoming 30 years. It's an average of $3 trillion a year. It's totally unthinkable, I think, to have this in mind. And we, as Anders said, we are facing a huge wave of infrastructure that will affect all the Earth that has not been affected by infrastructure yet. And taking that into account, many international organizations decided also to know what can they do. We also can speak about United Nations, about OECD, about G20. So it's not the smallest organizations, but a lot of problems have appeared because biodiversity, how to say that, it's not their main issue. And the link between biodiversity and infrastructure, it's one of the most challenging part to be done. In 2018, first step was done under the umbrella of United Nations to start a reflection on how to mainstream infrastructure and biodiversity. And for the first time in an international negotiation, we saw that it was also the possibility to have a global overview on all infrastructure and their relation to biodiversity. So, and earlier this year, United Nations go a step further, and they created a resolution also to highlight the need to have sustainable infrastructure. And within this declaration, you have also a strong highlight dedicated to infrastructure and biodiversity and the need to share knowledge. On those points, we are really fundamental for upcoming steps. Today, where is the knowledge? Knowledge is mostly based at national scale. Step by step, you can see that it's also very hard to have to have a more consolidated knowledge at regional scale, and more harder now to have it at global scale. But really, the potential of knowledge is really growing up, because even if we have a lot of knowledge at national scale, the global impact is much bigger. And to reach that goal, we really need to work all together, not only ministries all together, but or research institute or private companies or NGOs. Really, we need also to work really together for the same goal. Just to let you remind where knowledge comes from. Most of the knowledge that we have on infrastructure and biodiversity comes from the road on biodiversity. Anders mentioned also the COS 341 that was starting in the 90s. So most of the knowledge was also based in this. And roads and railroads were also providing the fundamental basis of this knowledge. But step by step, other kind of infrastructure also raised up their interest into this topic. And now all kind of infrastructure, including renewable energies, are also dealing with this topic. And we need also to know how we can share a common tree of knowledge that can be really fundamental basis for all of us, and we have to break silo in a very fundamental way. But this knowledge, it's not also a unique knowledge to be done at European scale. It's also a question to be shared with all actors over the world. And IENE, with ICOAT, ANET, ACLI, and Latin America Network, is also working to develop this common ground of knowledge. For that purpose, also, European Commission also decided not only to focus on infrastructure and biodiversity for sure, but they want also to have at least a third of their budget dedicated to environmental issue. And their objective is also by 2026 to have 30% for environmental issue and 10% for biodiversity. On the research side, they identified 6 different clusters, and the one that is of interest for us is also the cluster 5. But it's not so easy to orientate money on this topic, because we have really a relevant challenge to face with multiple factors to address. And one of the major factors to be addressed is also the dispersion of actors. We are, most of us, isolated into our job, into our topics, and we need also to create this network. And IENE is really an opportunity for that. We need also to develop really a strategic approach on this question. And we need also to have a more robust and replicable source of knowledge to be replicable as much as possible. And the last but not least, it's also how to capitalize on knowledge. What has been done by the oldest of us is really important to be reused and not to reinvent the wheel every day. But the challenge is really that our topic is across it's beyond the clusters that have been established by European Commission, and we have to find the balance between all of them, with biodiversity cluster, with health, with culture, with also all of the security. And it's really something that must think beyond borders and clusters. Also, the BISON project aims at also opening doors and creating those such opportunities. We are working with all kinds of infrastructure, transport infrastructure, and open to what will come in upcoming years, because it will be very hard to think transport infrastructure as it was in the past, because what happens with electrical highways, what will happen with new way of moving. And so we have to think in a different way for the future and to anticipate, not only to observe what has been done in the past. And it's really a challenge. For that purpose, we need also to integrate a multidisciplinary approach. And those goals are really key synergies to be developed. So I will not say it anymore, but Anders also said. But the BISON project is a really huge and very ambitious project to be developed. And our main objective is really to help innovation, to help also our members, but also the users of the BISON project to go a step beyond what are the habits to be done. And Carme will explain you in a very short moment what is happening with current knowledge, and Thierry will also explain what will be the perspective of the project. But clearly, we are trying to do our best to go a step further. So thank you. Carme, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to see all of you and also to have all the people that are following online. So I will begin with this nice slide prepared by Andreas. Andreas Saylor, thank you to remember all of us the challenges our societies are facing, and to remember that business as usual is not anymore an option for all of us, and that transport and energy infrastructure have a crucial role, is a big part of the problem, which means that we can also have it as a big part of the solution. Consequences, the devastating consequences are clear for all of us. I don't have to remember. Also the number of weather-related disasters, which I'm sure all of you are already experiencing in your houses, in your lands. But also the consequences on biodiversity, the loss of biodiversity, the loss of the erosion, the loss of species, the reduction on the numbers, these two phenomena that we are both experiencing, and that of course are asking for a fast reaction for all of us. In BISON, we have analyzed first trends, some major trends. First, the optimistic, the bright side of the moon, as we are expecting a big revolution on transport. We are expecting, we have set already targets for not using any more cars fueled with energy from petrol or fuels. But we are expecting that we are going to use more electric and other clean energies, new ways of transport, new mobility also attitudes, let's say. But meanwhile, what we face is our infrastructure and more threatened by any disasters, floods, strong winds. And also we have more than 6 million kilometers already constructed of roads and railways in Europe, which means we need to adapt. We need to adapt them to be more resilient facing all these threats. And this, for sure, provides us opportunities to work in a completely new way with new technologies. Another trend we remark is the invasive species conflict that we are facing with huge investments from maintenance, but also huge costs on biodiversity because they, of course, escape from infrastructure and invade our landscapes. Also phenomena that have the positive and the negative side. We call it like rewilding. I mean that Europeans are abandoning rural areas. Forests are growing, particularly on the Mediterranean. And we can think this is wonderful, but when you are thinking about forest fires, it's not so nice. But we also have these keystone species that are not declining, but increasing, more bears, more wolves, more ungulates, more wild boars. So we must provide all these beasts with ecological corridors, with, let's say, landscapes where they can live, but we also need to provide solutions, because the other phase of all these phenomena is that we have increasing strongly the numbers of animal-vehicle collisions, but not only, we are dealing also with other transport infrastructures. You cannot see, but this is a plane hit by a big bird. And you see that we also have a strong increase on the bird strikes, for example, on airports, which are demanded for sure to provide solutions. We have also this trend that you of course know about, these cumulative effects. We don't find the way to deal properly with this phenomena, because, as you know, the first cut is just the first cut, the road, but then it comes all the associated development, the cascade effects, and this is not properly addressed for sure and in our environmental impact assessments. But let's go to opportunities. Yeah? First of all, it's these strategies, legislation tools. It's like, just I remarked the European Green Deal. We want to be climate neutral by 2050. And in the European Strategy for Biodiversity that have fixed several targets for 2030, targets that for sure you can have it in mind in your day-to-day, like reduce chemical pesticides, reverse pollinator decline, reduce alien invasive species, and of course, also to promote these nature-based solutions. I want to remind all of you, all the people that are working on transport, I'm sure you know that all the authorities on operators of infrastructure are like preparing or thinking about, we need to prepare action plans to reduce the effect, to adapt the infrastructure to the climate change consequences. So this is a huge opportunity to change completely the paradigm. If we adapt using concrete and metal, it's a failure, a big failure. Then we have the opportunity really to work together and to work more with, let's say, alive organisms, with nature-based solutions everywhere. It's an opportunity also. Well, here we have Hans Becker, an honor for us to have all of us with you, Hans. When you begin, this is from the Netherlands, when we begin to construct fauna passages, well, it has been exciting. These 30 years, we have learned a lot. Now, these structures are crucial. These are crucial not only in the new infrastructure to provide this permeability and to allow ecological corridors to really not to be obstructed, but also we have the opportunity, and I have to say the duty, to defragment. The existing infrastructure we have, of course, can be defragmented. This is an image of the work of Marita Bocher and all the big teams on BISON working with these defragmentation maps, identifying the ecological corridors, and then the opportunity to coordinate the 10 nature with the 10 transport also. Of course, change the way in which we are maintaining. Maintenance is a huge opportunity also, ecological maintenance. By maintenance, we can also contribute to ecological restoration. And tools. I invite you to read the report or to go to the talk of Sylvain Mouleron, another colleague from the BISON team. Think about the new tools we have, but not only, like, of course, on the biodiversity side, we are using new technologies, artificial intelligence is helping, genetics is helping, but also, again, combined with infrastructure, You can learn about BIM, building information models, and digital twins, opportunities to follow up, to integrate all data, to integrate also the monitoring in all the life cycle steps. And my last slide, but perhaps the most important one. We are also dealing, and I invite you to the workshop that we will hold, I think it's in Thursday. We are also identifying gaps and barriers, because if we all have all such huge knowledge, why are not we applying it? It's our question. Which are the gaps, which are the barriers, yeah? So when we began working with this workshop, the surprise is that, of course, we talk about research and innovation, crucial. But then, most important things, we are beginning to talk about capacity building, the capacity to listen and to understand the others, which mean using a common vocabulary, for example, to have learning hubs for knowledge transfers, not only online, of course, still training, going to the field, sharing discussions on the infrastructure. All this is crucial, and moreover, and perhaps for me, it's really a big surprise when you understand more and more that this is much more dealing about attitudes, about emotions, about yes, I want to change, and I want to understand why I have to change, yeah? So this is very important in future that Thierry will explain us, and to talk also about the strong governments and ambition-aligned policies. So it's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carme. And I would say our presentation is like a sandwich. The best part is in the middle. So Carme was the best part. And actually, well, if you look at me, so you understand that there are two main communities in our project BISON. This is about infrastructure, transport infrastructure, and biodiversity. If you saw how Carme is dressed, you can guess from where she comes, and, well, you can imagine from which community I represent. Hopefully, I've put a bit of blue, so I'm a bit better than a purely, let's say, the dark side of infrastructure. But there is hope, obviously, and this is what I'm trying to bring in the last part of the speech. So in the BISON project, the very, let's say, short-term or mid-term outcome that we want to reach is to summarize all the development, all this fruitful collaboration and knowledge development that we've been able to accomplish, and we continue to accomplish till the end of the project, until the month 30. So we will try to gather this information into one, let's say, effective document, comprehensive but not long, because we want this to be, let's say, a useful document for the deployment of the knowledge that we have built. So this is going to be gathered into one document called SRDA, really gathering the state of the art, so what we have been able to collect and to, let's say, harness throughout Europe and during the time of the project. So it's really a very important first step. But then also what is important is to look for what needs to be further research. So there will be a dedicated part on the research needs, so where to put the effort in the next years in terms of R&D activities. And this is really a topic that we want to focus. But there are also obviously a number of technologies or solutions that are already ready for deployment. And this is also what we want to present in a comprehensive way, to that especially the transport authorities, maybe, so the black community, can really take on board and not wait later to do this deployment. Obviously, everything is linked to funding, so we understood that there will be some funding available. But at the same time, it's, as Yannick said, it's not easy to catch this funding. So the idea of this document is to show that we have some research needs, and then this has to be also linked with some research funding as well. Last but not least, to get also a large commitment behind, so we are working on this stakeholder engagement, and we will also identify, in a way, in this document, wrap up who is the main people or the main organization in charge. So this is really for the conclusion of BISON that will come next year. So BISON is supposed to end in June next year, let's say mid next year. So this will be available at that time, and that will constitute this wrap-up final output of BISON. But beyond this, let's say, BISON experience and this very comprehensive report, what we really want to create, and this is in a way the challenge we want to achieve within this BISON, is with this merge or with this understanding of these two communities. This was the first time, as Yannick mentioned in his first part, that we have such huge project gathering the two communities of infrastructure, transport infrastructure on one hand, and the biodiversity on the other hand. And well, it was shown in one of the slides that basically transport infrastructure worked by itself, biodiversity used to work by itself as well. And if we looked even further beyond, there was probably a very strong opposition between these two communities. On the one hand, the transport community felt that, okay, they were working for the good of the societies, helping the social cohesion, helping development or economic development, while probably the biodiversity was only to look at the birds. This changed along the time, starting maybe with the transport, mostly on the road, and then it moved to other mode of transport. But it was mostly a slight cohabitation, I would say, then collaboration. And for what we want to achieve is really to move further and to really have this synergy between the infrastructure and the biodiversity, or biodiversity and infrastructure. And when we talk about symbiosis, it's really that now we can't think only the two aside, but they have really every time together. Together from the policy side, from the funding side, from the data and standards, and of course throughout the phases of the infrastructure lifetime, so from the planning, design, adaptation, operating, and decommissioning. So every time we pronounce this word, or one of the words, it has to be every time integrated, the infrastructure and the biodiversity. Last but not least in that context is when we look at the keywords on Google, or when we look at funding, or when we look at policies, they really foster on climate change. So we know, of course, climate change is a critical issue. But at the same time, we would like to see biodiversity much more emphasis. And without biodiversity, there would be, for sure, much stronger climate change. And that's something that we would also like to see the policy and the funding behind reflecting that. So that's really one medium to long-term impact that we want to have from BISON. And of course, not only BISON, but IENE as a longer also organization structure as well. So in other words, we also want to highlight the fact that well, infrastructure is considered as a common good, and this is to be also the case for biodiversity. And there are really two critical common goods that if we lose them, we are simply in big, big trouble. And this is really a long-term also perspective we want to stress and to make sure that everybody, well, feel that, not only everybody, but also that it is reflected at the policy side, on the research and innovation side as well. To maybe move even further, so this project BISON really was the first in its kind to tackle in a very strong and manner throughout Europe the collaboration and hopefully up to the synergy and the symbiosis between transport, infrastructure and biodiversity. But this is clear that this is also not enough, and we want to move the consideration beyond the transport issue. and to also look at the energy side as well. And I think we can't take the best even time now when we look at the struggle we have in terms of energy, when we look at the war, because I think this is the right terminology, and the stress it puts at the energy, let's say, prices. From my point of view, this is of course difficult, but it's hopeful. There is a hope behind, and the hope is that people realize that we are probably consuming too much, and we have to change the way we have to consume. Unfortunately, that's not the way we see the reaction at the moment. The reaction is more how to secure the same consumption. So if we have to secure the same consumption, it means that we have probably to change the way we produce. And certainly there will be a strong impact on the biodiversity as well. So we should not, let's say, lose time about that and really tackle the issue since the beginning. And especially we talk a lot about renewable energy. So how can we make sure that the production and the distribution of the renewable energy will also be aligned with the biodiversity protection. And so this is something that we want to foster as well into the new work program of the Commission. We have started lobbying, or let's say advocating, because that's a better word, for that, let's say, extension of the consideration within Horizon Europe. And we hope to be successful in the next work program. So really bringing and going beyond the scope of biodiversity and transport infrastructure, but also including the energy side as well. So there is, in a way, hope, in a way, in this is going probably to be my last slide. And the hope is that if we look at the European policies, of course, the national policies are also quite much reflecting, especially in certain countries. But at the European level, a large number of initiatives and policies have been issued recently in the last few years and even the last months, really pushing forward the notion of environment, the notion of climate change, and certainly the notion of biodiversity. So when you look at all these policies that have been put on the screen, they are all having an impact or an embedded, let's say, text related to biodiversity, which means that Europe, and especially the European institutions, do not consider the future without biodiversity, landscape, environment, and climate change. And that's probably something that we can use forward and as a sign of hope for our next development. And maybe what the best as symbiosis, as this last picture or videos, where you see that finally the road becomes an aquarium. So maybe this is the last hope and the last sign for the best future for us. Thank you very much.
Just to say that when we started really to think about the BISON project, we had also the IENE network into our mind, and also what will be developed within the BISON project will be also totally free of use, and it will be for you as practitioners, as stakeholders, as researchers, and it will be very important into our mind that it will not be a good or big book to be used under the table to block any movement. So it will be really something that will evolve into the time. And as Anders said about the handbook for road ecology, about what is upcoming for emerging topics to be addressed within upcoming research calls, I think it's really important for you to realize that the BISON project is really your project, and you have to be very attentive to what will be produced, because it will open the way, and it will open the way for what will be addressed to you as researchers in the future, and what will be the ambitions that we have for achieving this goal of mainstreaming infrastructure and biodiversity. And for sure, you that are here physically or remotely, you need really to be strongly involved into changing your mind. I didn't put an image that I had because more than 40 years ago, more or less, there was also a conference in Strasbourg that was also the first European conference dedicated to road on biodiversity. And when I was also in charge of organizing the IENE conference 2016. I read this book and I saw the topics that were there, maybe not 35 years ago. And then 35 years after, I saw maybe 80 or 90% of the topics that were addressed 35 years before were also there. And we had the same topic. So we had to anticipate. Also, the research is also a way to anticipate what will be the future. And we have to capitalize on what has been done and well done in the past. But we have also to think in the future. And I think it's really important for you to think about the future. And you are the future of research and innovation. So, thank you. So, but we are here for your questions. And I think BISON and will be very present today. Andreas, sorry.
Yes, I would like to make a comment as well. I think it's, thank you first for these wonderful presentations. So thank you first for these wonderful presentations. And I think the BISON project is really fantastic. And when we're working with the BISON project, looking at the future trends and the needs that we face, it became very, very evident to me at least that we're forgetting some very important factor, and this is the human. The human perspective, the human dimension, the cultural perspectives, the society we are missing. We're focusing on biodiversity and infrastructure. We are still in our silos. Yeah, we are still in our silos. And in order to be taken seriously by the society, we cannot only focus on birds and bees. We must focus we must approach the holistic way that we say is so necessary. So I think that for the future of IENE, for example, and also for the future of the BISON project, we need to include people and the society in a much better way. I don't know exactly how to do this because I'm a wildlife biologist, but I see that there is a need, and there are certainly people who can do that. Thank you.
Good morning to all, first of all. It was a nice starting of the brainstorming, but we have to see also how to develop a common knowledge and language, because people from transport, when you talk about corridors, they're talking about roads, railways. From our side, when we talk about corridors, we talk about how animals are moving, but we are here all together to agree what we mean when we use the word corridor. So this is what BISON is trying to do, to develop this common language and to be understandable when we talk to each other in order to give the society the opportunity to understand for what we are talking about. Because sometimes we are like alien species. We're talking for some subject that people are not understanding us. So this is very important.
Yeah, I think this is for me. So thank you, Lazarus, because this is a crucial point. And we have begun for the very, very basic question that is the glossary. And at this moment, I'm happy to say that the glossary that we initiate on Wildlife and Traffic Handbook is now being developed in the future together with FEHRL, the World Association, the global. So I think that this is really very crucial. It's the same with connectivity. We are speaking to the other, thinking that we understand each other, but we have completely different things on our minds. So it's also connected about what Andreas has told us, the need to construct a new way, perhaps, to work together and to understand each other. Yeah.
Maybe also one thing about Andreas, one comment about your comment. I would say for me there are two obvious points that we could propose to tackle this human dimension. One of it is certainly through education, because the more people will be educated about this symbiosis need from the biodiversity and infrastructure, the more we can move forward. That's clear. And on the other hand, and it's also linked to what I said about the energy comment, it's also about our way of consuming. And the overall way of living, so consuming in a way, is critical. It's of course linked to the first one, because the more we will be, when I say we, is the whole society is going to comprehend the fact that we are destroying in certain way our nature. And I think for me the thing which marked some of the things I learned is the second principle of physics, the entropy. In other words, you can't create order somewhere without destroying or creating disorder somewhere else. This is physics, so you can't negotiate with physics. It just comes as a law. And one time people and everyone will understand that. I think it's going to be much easier, because we will understand that we can't do something without having an impact somewhere else. So if we consume by moving goods or ourselves, then clearly it needs more infrastructure. And then let's say, we can do our best to limit the impact, on biodiversity, as it was mentioned by Anders in his first presentation related to the CEDAR updated activities. We can do that, but we can't make it zero. And all this concept of zero or neutral, whatever, doesn't exist. It's always having an impact. So it's probably these two ways that we could try to initiate within BISON.
Okay, thank you very much. We only have time for one question more.
Also, more of a comment only, or a reflection. My name is Marcus, and thank you for a great conference. So when we're talking about different mitigation measures and fauna passages and making green corridors and everything, there is this disadvantage that might happen, that it looks like we are creating green constructions, which we are not doing, and we should have a solid voice towards society that it is not feasible to continue travel as it is. Like the pictures and what we have in the future coming, with just increasing demand for transportation, we need to say that we don't have the tools to mitigate this, simply. I think that is an important thing for all politicians to hear from our community.
Yes, and that's easier in Europe than in other continents.
Okay, thank you very much all. So it was not easy to provoke you, but once you start, well, you cannot really be stopped easily. Thank you very much all.